you've got to have the courage to say that, look, some things are going to right, some things are not going to go right. But I have a vision. Yes, I will course correct, but I will not abandon it. Hey, Joel, how are you?
Fantastic, my friend. How are you doing today?
Very well, very well. Good to see you.
You ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, let's do this thing, man. Why not?
Nice. All right, so where are you calling in from?
From Toronto right now.
Okay, we're just going to hang out and talk. And
Yeah.
just you and me, like as if we were going hanging out at lunch, and then we can edit everything. So we can edit it. We're going to make us all sound really smart and good and awesome.
Love it.
And
Love it.
yeah.
If there's a magic formula to make me sound smart, you got to give it to us too, man.
We're doing it. It's called having a Jake. Could you imagine what life would be like if you could like record it ahead of time and then just release like the most perfect moments? That would be unbelievable.
I know. Don't you think that's what, the social media is these days? People just curate their lives and kind of like pick the best pictures and the moments and stuff. I don't know, man. I actually think that might make people sadder in reality, but then I'm not the social media generation. So what do I know?
You're a human. So it is an interesting topic because it forces individuals to develop new skills like discipline, right? Like you would have to understand that this is how the tool is being used. I think a lot of the trouble is when you get like the 12-year-olds or the less mature people mentally, like when they start consuming this content and thinking that that's reality versus having enough life experience to know people go on there and they happen to post the best versions of themselves. Right. And yeah, it's like, controlling your like food intake, right? It's a skill you have to learn.
Absolutely. And I think, and I know this is probably like off topic, but this is an interesting topic to me because it kind of boils down to what is the impact of technology on society? Because guess, the social media, internet and stuff, this is what we do. We kind of like have a hand in this networking thing and making this possible. And I just feel that there are some great, amazing things that technology does, but then at the same time, technology, like any other tool, could be misused as well. And I think this is perhaps the first time in our history where technology is moving way faster than our ability to adapt the social norms around it. So it's a really interesting experiment. It hasn't really happened to this extent in the history of mankind. So we'll see how it goes.
I like to think about it because I like the way you think. I can already tell you think about life and stuff. I feel like our civilization is almost going through a puberty. Like we're going through this like adolescent phase, and we're gonna have the teenage angst, and then we're gonna get into maturity, and then we're gonna get some smooth sailing.
I think I agree with you. I think we're like 13-year-old right now.
Yep.
And then hopefully we'll be past 18. Once we're past 21 and we can drink, we'll be golden, right? So
or once we get to the point where like drinking causes the hangover, so we're smart enough to like not do it as much.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to give a shout out to your designers. Like when I was going through your website and your content and like doing all my research and learning about you, I just you guys have fantastic design. I'm personally a design geek. And so I always like to give a shout out. So
that's awesome. That's great to hear. I mean, like it's Carla and Christy are kind of representing that, but we have some really phenomenal people and that obviously reflects in anything marketing related that we do. But if you ever get a chance to kind of go on our technology and product side, you'll see a similar kind of vibe there. Because look, in the end, what you see is a huge part of how you experience a thing. And just because we are technology people, that doesn't negate that basic principle. Our vision is one of the most important ways in which we interact, not just with our environment, but also with technology as well. So design is one of the key elements of technology in today's world.
And then what's your core business model?
So we are in the networking industry, right? So we have tons and tons of technology, right? Some of the stuff that stays behind the scenes. You can think of like, when you think of like data centers and networks, there's like these massive racks full of, hardware and switches and routers and stuff. So that's one portion of our business. The other portion of our business is more experiential in the sense that, look, all technology have different people who experience it. There are users who experience it, and there are multiple classes of the user. So there are the users who are actually running these networks. So that's obviously a user, but then there are their users. So say, for example, if in a retail store our technology is deployed, sure, the IT of the retail store is the user, but so are the customers that are walking around in the store, and they experience the technology. So the second part of our entire business model is around that experience for the user, for the buyer, for the seller, for the user's users, and so on and so forth. And that is pretty much centered around cloud. And cloud, I mean, a cloud is kind of an interesting word because different people kind of think of it differently. But to me, cloud is a culture. Cloud is a way of doing things, starting from experience, starting from being omni-channel, starting from instant gratification, if you would, instant feedback, where all of a sudden distances don't really matter and stuff like that. So if you combine all of that and call that, quote unquote cloud, then the rest of our business is centered around cloud.
I like that explanation because I've been talking to a lot of different, cloud experts trying to wrap my mind around it. And one of the things that really helped my education, someone was explaining it to me about, like, if you take groups of developers at a company that didn't have cloud, they just had like an on-prem solution. And then you can't, like, if you just switch them to cloud, the actual workflows of the developers are different. The culture is different. You have to have different talent. You'll have to like bring in other engineers to help like work next to them. And then you have different processes within the organization about how you actually would get an instance booted up. And so this concept of cloud just being servers not at your location has kind of like gone away, and it's shifting to this like cloud is like a culture. Yeah. I love that.
Absolutely. And think about it this way, right? Because it's not just the developers that are part, and I have lots and lots of them, some of the most brilliant ones out there. But that's not the only part. The other part is, well, what are you going to do with the cloud? So that's the product definition part, or traditionally you call it product management. That's also part of my organization, and they have to shift as well. Because when you are developing a product, you are developing a set of features, functionality that you're going to package it together, either in a hardware or even in a software, and you're going to deliver that. When you are envisioning cloud, you are designing an experience. And that experience, the funny part is, or the interesting part is that as you're designing it, the expectations of that experience from the users is also evolving, is also changing. So you really have to immerse yourself into that experience and think of it from the human point of view rather than just the technology point of view. And then you get it. And then you say like, okay, this is what cloud means. Yeah, my developer is part of it. My product definition person is part of it. My professional services person is part of it. My salesperson is part of it. And most importantly, my user is an active participant into this. My user is going to help me develop this, help me evolve this. So I know I get very passionate about it, but for me, cloud is not a technology. Cloud is a culture. And a company that really wants to transition to cloud has to start that at a culture level. So,
oh, this is a great interview. Yeah. I love you. I'm a huge fan. We'll clip that out. I don't think I've ever told a guest I love them before, but one of the
you can send that private copy to us, right?
Yeah. But all right. So when I get great people on, I'm really curious to know. So your path here to where you are today, did you start out like doing a bunch of the wrong things, or did you get in a position where your first projects you were just surrounded by amazing people and just soaked it all up?
So it's interesting. I'm going to answer it slightly differently. Yes, absolutely surrounded by amazing people, no doubt about that. But no, nobody gets to it like right away that, look, bang, first try, it's awesome. But I don't really think that on the cloud journey, there's any rights and wrongs. There's just, the key is to move. The only wrong part is if you sit and wait. That's the only wrong part. So what you do is, I always tell my teams, like, look, move fast and experiment. And like one of the mantra that I have for my team is fearless innovation. because one of the biggest thing that stops innovation is the fear that, oh shit, this is not going to work, right? And so you got to just keep moving. You'll keep doing things, but just know that those things, you might think that they're the best thing in the world. Your user might or might not agree with you. And if they don't agree with you, get the feedback, move on, right? And so I think our journey started from kind of getting a team together and kind of like having this vision, a general vision that this is the direction in which we're moving. And then again, as I said, I'm a big culture, fan where we started with developing that culture. Do not be afraid and do not stop. Just keep moving. You will do right things, you'll do wrong things, you'll think people like, you'll do things people don't like. As long as you're doing one more thing right than wrong, you're moving forward. Just keep doing it. And it's a muscle, right? So if you develop a team that is exercising that muscle, then they keep getting better and better, just like an athlete, right? The more they practice, the better they get. Yes, there is a certain amount of, innate talent, if you would, but that innate talent does not determine whether you're going to be on that podium or not. It's your nonstop effort towards that. That's really what makes you successful. And it's no different with teams. You just keep doing it, keep moving fast, and more importantly, just making sure that the culture of the team is solid, is rich, and is consistent. No?
Yeah, like when you talk about the sports analogy, right? I was looking at, a few years ago, I was doing some research. I was reading all the, biographies of billionaires that are currently alive that I enjoy, like Musk, Bezos, Branson. And then I was looking at pro athletes, and I was trying to, in an informal way, like educate myself on how these people think, because I found that if you can emulate how someone thinks in their decision making process, that's like a superpower. And it wasn't being taught anywhere. There's like no course on it. So I was just putting it together myself. And what I found is that a couple things that I didn't hear talked about much at all. And I think the biggest one was that they find this way to like drill and practice the fundamentals, but the magic is really, because I started drilling the fundamentals and I found out the hardest part about that is consistency. And the thing that allows you to win there is your ability to make it new again. Like, how do you make the fundamentals interesting and new again for yourself? Like, and if you can figure out how to play that game, then you're just going to go straight to the top.
Absolutely. And I mean, you said that you are really into design, which is awesome because I love design as well. But that is the design theory, right? It's just you take the familiar from one context and apply it to solve another problem in another context. And that's what brings that intuitiveness to your solution. Now, the way I think about it is, and that applies to your product, that applies to your team, because look, there's so much amazing stuff that people in the sports have done, people in like other areas, anywhere where there's a concept of team, starting from, the first responders, that's a team, right? So all of those things, when you bring them together and you apply them in a technology space, people might be like, oh, this analogy doesn't really make sense, but it's familiar to people. And when you bring it into a different context, they just lock onto that. And then, as our mutual point, you got to stay consistent with it. No matter the world's best strategy, best tactic, the first time something doesn't go right and you get scared and you change it, you just lost it. You gotta have the courage to say that, look, some things are gonna right, some things are not going to go right, but I have a vision. Yes, I will course correct, but I will not abandon it. Within reason, of course, but I think that in the technology space, people sometimes leave things too quickly, rather than adjusting it, course correcting it. Courage plays a big role in it, and I'm not talking about individual courage of a leader or anything, but the courage of the team. And again, boils down back to the culture. If you develop that culture of strength, a culture of courage, and a culture of, look, change is constant, either we can change or we can initiate that change, or the change will force us. Either way, we're ready to go. I mean, like, once you develop that, it just really all comes together. Yeah.
So you have like a large organization, you have more than 200 people in technology, right? Just for conversation purposes.
Yeah, I'm more than 1,200 people in my team, but yeah.
Okay, perfect. Good.
Yeah.
But you get over that hump of like you have to deal with mass communication. And so, which is like the root of my interest right now. So we talk a lot about culture, very important. Is that the strategy for how to scale the results that you want? Like, how do you have 1,200 people, and you can't go sit down with every single one of them, so you have to find a way to scale yourself across this organization.
Mhm.
So, how do you think about that?
Yeah, that a brilliant question, and which is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about and doing, because a lot of times uh, when you're doing something in three people, it works out beautifully, and you're like, oh, this is amazing, and you throw it to like 3,000 people, and you're like, oh, this thing does not work at all. So scale brings its own challenges, and team and culture are no different. But I think there is a methodical way to go about this. The first one is your individual or your immediate core, if you would. So as a leader, when you go out, it's not very dissimilar to when a painter sits down and they're staring at a blank canvas and they're like, all right, what is it that I'm going to do? And typically, different artists have different views, but some of them will just kind of like quickly draw a sketch, and then they'll pick one element. Most of the time, those are eyes just being the most important, and they will really, really focus on it. And then that, evolves into the rest of the features. So teams are not dissimilar to that. As a leader, when you are developing a team or when you're envisioning a team, you think and you really think of it like, what is it that you want to do? I'm not talking about skill sets. Don't start with titles, not like, oh, I want a senior director of this and a VP of that. No, that's the wrong way. Don't even start with the skills like, hey, I need a developer and I need a product manager and stuff. No, you start with what you want your team to be. What's the culture that you want to have? What's the vibe, as some people say? And that comes from your gut, from your experience, who you are. Fortunately or unfortunately, most teams end up reflecting their leaders. Sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that not so much. But you start with that. Then you start your core team, like think of it like in my case, my direct reports, right? So there's not that many of them. There's like 6 or 7 of them. But they really truly are what allow you to scale. They're never going to be an exact replica of you. You don't want that. If everybody's like you, then you've just killed diversity right then and there. So you start by building what we call as an A team. Well, what is an A team? A team is a set of individuals who are brilliant in their own right. They are strong, they're opinionated, they're strong-willed. Most of the people might think of them as troublesome, if you would. But they're really good at what they do. You find them. Don't be scared. They're going to be smarter than you are, and hopefully they are. Otherwise, it's no point building a team. So find people who are brighter than you, smarter than you, maybe very different than you, and very different from each other as well. Then you collect them together. Well, now you have a bunch of A players. How do you convert that into a team? And that where comes in the culture, a culture built on mutual respect, a culture built on like, look, our vision, this is my vision. They buy into the vision. Don't tell them how to actually do it. That's why you hired them. I'm like, they're really good at executing. So don't get in their way. But at the same time, have a collective vision. And then don't be a hands-off manager. A lot of time leaders come in and they say like, look, no, I don't want to be too involved because that's micromanagement. I call BS on that. And conversely, people say that, look, if I don't really interfere, I'm a very hands-off manager. Don't be a hands-off manager, especially if you're a leader. Don't tell them how to do their job, but be engaged with them. How are they feeling? Stimulate them intellectually and emotionally. They have to be vested into the vision. Because a lot of this thing, oh, this is just work. Well, work is more than half of our life. So you have to be emotionally vested in it. You need to get something out of it, So it is personal and then most importantly, focus on how do they develop. The thing about A players are they're excellent in one or two things, but there might be areas where they're not so much. But that excellence on one side pretty much overshadows everything else. But eke out those other areas with them and help them evolve, have them develop. And that's what really creates this culture of this core team. And then what happens is that now you're not replicating one individual. Now you're replicating the culture of this team, and that scales. Because as more teams develop, those teams will then kind of fashion themselves on the culture of this core team, and they'll add their own diversity to it. And now you have these groups of teams that are all across, and when they come together, that creates the culture of an organization. So in a nutshell, I know I went pretty long on this, but summarizing this, as a leader, you do not scale by replicating yourself. You create the culture of your team, and through that example, everybody else creates their team, and that is how you scale.
Oh, so succinct. I love it. Now, I want to dive into this because I've got some questions. So the first question I have is, have you ever seen it inside or outside of your organization with this? So let's say I'm going to build like hypothetical scenario. So you've got a good culture, right? And it's scaling, but then like some bad culture pockets pop up, right? Because let's say it's not perfect, it's not 100%. Let's say you're getting 80%. What do you do with those? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So this is bound to happen, right? Because company is kind of like a society. A society can never stay ideal. that's just how it goes, right? We have seen it over and over and over again in the history of mankind. These cultures and these societies kind of like going up and then eventually coming down. So nothing is permanent. But in the case of a company, when you develop a culture and you see somebody or the pocket developing that is different. So I'm going to start with different.
Okay.
Why? Because when it's different, it could be different two ways. One way in which, remember, it's again about diversity, right? So just because they're different, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's bad for the company. So you have two options. Engage. Do not just kind of stamp it out. That's bad, 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 right? So engage with that and learn and understand. And maybe there's something in there that you can incorporate into the broader culture, and the net result is going to be even better. That's one option. The other option is that no, it really is disruptive, and it's really not in a good way. And it's just simply not going to be work. And at that time, the decisiveness of leadership comes into play. Do not sit and wait. Act. Either embrace it, or look, they might be great people. They might have a place in a different portion of the company, in a different organization, or outside of the organization. So, but the key thing about the leader, as I said, speed, right? So sitting around waiting helps nobody. Engage directly, either learn from it or still learn from it and decide that this is not going to be part of our company. To me, these are decisions that as a leader, you have to take every single day. And that's what makes you a leader, not just doing all the good things and standing up and giving good news, but a leader is really truly made when things are not going well.
Yes, 100%. I mean, it's I was like a fan of founders and things like that before I was one. And it just looked so cool. And then I realized, okay, the reason that there's a lot of benefit for being at the top is because it's the most difficult position to be in. I mean, it's just the hardest thing to do. And, for me as an individual, I typically seek out the hardest things to do because I just have found I'm addicted to like growth. Like I like to grow. And the way I can do that is by putting myself in bigger, newer, scarier positions. Right. And so, yeah, I really like the way your mind processes data.
Hey, that's what Extreme is good about, right? This is where we excel. We take tons of data and we make something out of it. So I think it kind of like then figures why I work here and why I'm so invested in Extreme, because my individual thought process, the way I think or the way I am, is now reflected in what we build and how we are transforming the entire networking industry. Because anyways, it's kind of interesting that how companies and leaders kind of select each other. It's kind of one of those things, right? And it's amazing.
Well, that's why I like getting to talk to you and understand who you are as a person, because I have found, like you said earlier, organizations tend to reflect their leaders, their mindsets and their cultures. And so I think that's useful for me. I've had, people come up to me, like when I was doing the in-person speaking circuit last year, I did like over 50 different locations, and people would come up to me and they'd say, "Hey, I heard this person on your podcast. I like the way they think." I ended up like using them as a vendor, or some people said, like I got one individual who said that they ended up moving halfway across the world and working for that leader.
That's
And
awesome.
just all sorts of cool stories from getting to know like who the people are. And how did you meet the other executives? Like, how did you get involved in Extreme?
Yeah, it's it's kind of interesting, right? So being in the tech industry, and right now I'm in Toronto, but I'm a San Franciscan. That's my hometown. So being in the Silicon Valley, these things happen all the time. The company that I was working for, the unit that I ran, that actually got acquired by Extreme, and that's kind of how I met Ed, who's our CEO, my boss, and it was just like this. As part of that acquisition, we just started chatting, and we realized that look, we're very different people, but we have that passion for what we do. And we're really both very heavily invested in this culture thing. And we have very clear, strong ideas of what we want to do. And from there, it just kind of started. And just like you mentioned, you work for leaders, you work for culture. And I just came into the company and I was like, oh my God, I just love it. And there's so much potential. There's so much more that we can do. And then to me, it was like, look, we have this something amazing within Extreme, but why only within Extreme? Let's go change the whole networking industry. And why only networking industry? Technology is at the core of every experience in today's society, one way or another. Whether it is like kids talking to their grandparents on, video chat, or students kind of like, e-learning or talking to each other, all the way to like the way we meet new people, that's online as well. The way we communicate, the way we work. Pretty much networking anchors today's society. So why stay at that? Let's just figure out that how we can take technology and really make it work for the society, democratize it. So far, networking technology is kind of like have and have not. Some people get it, some people don't get it. You got to be a big company to be able to buy all of these. I think those are old ways of thinking about it. Let's democratize it. Let's make sure that the best and the brightest of the networking industry or the networking technology is available to everybody, from that mom and pop shop at the corner, to the largest chains in the world. They should both have access to that technology, regardless of their constraints around money and skill set and stuff. So simplify it, and then sit and watch what they do with this technology. So I think that's kind of was a passion that we had, and we kind of connected, and then now 2.5 years later, here we are.
And so what was that M&A process like? Did you have the opportunity to be like involved in that initial acquisition, or did you come? Okay, so you were. So did you decide that like what your role would be at Extreme Networks, or did you just kind of come in, handle the acquisition, and then go up? Like, how did that work?
So it starts a little bit earlier, because once you're one of the main players in an acquisition on the part of like the unit or the company or the asset that is being sold, you obviously have multiple different options, suitors, if you would. And you do have, and yes, being public companies, there's the shareholder value, and there's all sorts of governance around it. But you do have a sort of a say. You do have your team that you love and you've built over years, and you want to find the right home for that team. You want to find the right home for the technology that you've built. So there is a little bit of that influence as well. So of course, being part of that process, when I really got to know Extreme and Ed and the team here, I really felt that this is the right place for the team that I've built, for the technology that I've built. And at that point, it wasn't really necessarily thinking about like, look, whether I'm going to be at Extreme or not. It was more about, finding a home for the team. But in that process, because, M&A processes are pretty long drawn out on both sides of the closing. But then it kind of just really truly evolved from like, hey, I'm finding a home for my team here, I want to make sure that it settles there, to let's go do this, and let's change Extreme and let's transform Extreme. And yeah, so it's kind of like worked that way. So wasn't really like, look, this is the company that is buying, I want to play this role. No, but it just organically evolved from there. Yeah.
Yeah, and the culture was a match because they had leaders at Extreme that saw the passion and then empowered the individuals to do that. And so that's a good fit then.
Yeah, it's like, at Extreme for us, we have multiple different values. I mean, like we have 5 or 6 different values. The two that I love the most, one is candor, which is, let's just not beat about the bush. Let's just have a real conversation, right? It's not about being around blunt or stuff like that. It is about having a real conversation, right? Let's just sit down. Let's just really engage on so that's one value that I love. And the second one is inclusion. And that is something that is very near and dear to my heart, because inclusion is something that is so broad. It is about diversity, but not just about gender diversity or racial diversity, but experiential diversity. People from different experiences, people with different thoughts, people with different circumstance. And then just bring all of them together. And just bringing them together is not good enough, by the way. In my word, the inclusion means that bring them together and then create an environment where they can be their best alongside people who are different than them. And that, I think, is very unique to Extreme, because when you look at CSR and other kind of like stuff on a lot of companies, they put it there. But being in the tech industry all my career, I just feel that there are very few companies that really internalize it and build everything around it, and Extreme is one of them. So yeah, great fit. I love being here.
I love when I get questions from people about like culture things, and I'd say 90% of the questions I get, or 80% of the questions I get are well, it's like the culture there, and then now that you are aware of this point, you get to choose: are you going to attempt to change the culture? Because that's one possibility. You could attempt to change the entire company, or you can attempt to find a place that has similar, values to your complementary values.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, this is the whole point of being your best. Some people are change agents, right? So they are their best, to your point, as you were mentioning earlier, that some people are best when they're really right there at the edge in the hardest problem or, situation. Some people, are more where they thrive in an area which kind of meets their personality, and they like to be in the middle of something and then just make it execute and roll along with it. So it just depends upon who you are. To me, black and white is not really fun, in the sense that if you already know the answers, then it's okay. Well, that's fine. But the magic really happens in the gray areas where you don't know the answer. You might not ever know the answer, but yet you need to move forward, and you need to take your team forward and your company forward. And that, to me, is exciting. That's where magic happens, right?
Yeah, what you're saying right now kind of reminds me. I was talking with Shri, who's the CTO over at PayPal,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about potential, because during that conversation that week, I was struggling with the fact that I had achieved some goals I had thought would take me 15 years, but I achieved them in 3. And I had the moment of the realization, and then I felt lost because I didn't have other goals set up. And so I was talking with him about that, and he was sharing with me this concept of like, your potential is dynamic, like your potential changes. And so that really helped me. Just hearing that simple phrase really helped me have words to articulate how I feel inside, chasing this thing that you never feel like you get to. And then that gives me some like comfort in the process and understanding the core principles of how things work. And my other favorite thing he shared with me, I think you would like, is he was talking about how confidence is cumulative.
Mm-hmm.
So like it builds up slowly over time in specific areas, because I feel that that's true inside too, because I am not easily confident, like, but I didn't know how to say that before, because I wouldn't say I'm not a confident person, because there's some areas where I'm very confident, and that's simply because of like software. I mean, I've been writing code for 17 years. It's like and, like, what do we want to talk about here? But there's other areas where I have less experience and less confidence. And so that concept of cumulative confidence, those two things were like big takeaways. I think you would really like him as a person. I'd be more than happy to introduce you if you'd like.
No, that would be awesome. And just, the things that he mentioned and the way you repeated it, it's just so true because, it's the same thing when you're doing something and you do it well and you get to like a really good state, you have learned some skills out of it, right? So you've learned some, and it's not skills in terms of, look, I can code, or I can make a PowerPoint and stuff. Not just that, but it's just some innate gut feels that you have developed, right? You can take those into a different area and apply them. So this is the part of it's being cumulative. And then in the second area, you will kind of acquire some other gems, if you would. So think about it this way, that every journey that you take, you acquire some gems, some artifacts. And the more journeys you take, the more you acquire, and the richer you are as a person, and not richer in terms of money, hopefully that as well, but richer in terms of being your experience and being the depth of your personality and the depth of the culture that you can develop around you. So no, I love what he said. It just resonates really well with me.
Yeah, and I think you point out a good point too. You can gain a lot of experience and learn a lot and get a lot of these gems and go over a long period of time without getting money.
Yeah,
Like you can get like musicians. I mean, like
true.
some musicians. But what I've noticed too is that like if you can I started to look at it like a video game, and myself being a character and me being the player of the game. And like money is an important part because it enables you to do more. You can scale yourself. It's a tool. So it's definitely not everything, but it is part of the mix. And if you can grow yourself and have awareness and make sure that you have your money component taken care of, then you can just go a lot farther. And it takes a long time. But I don't know, whoever designed this game, like whatever's going on with life, it's great job. Cause like you love it, you hate it, it's great, it sucks. But patience is my thing that I'm learning and I'm finding, and tell me if this is true as well. So I'm 32, just for some context. And I have found that patience becomes significantly easier as you get older.
Right. Yeah, it does. I do believe so. Because the idea with the patients, and I know it will take us into a different direction, but the idea there is that why people have patience or not patience has a lot to do, in addition to a lot of other things. It has to do about what have they experienced so far. Because if they've experienced enough, then sometimes they're willing to wait and see which direction does it go. But at early age, you're just too, you just want to quickly see where this goes. You're in accumulation phase. But as you get older, you're still accumulating, but now you're more intrigued by the opportunities of it going one way or another, or yet completely a different way. So I do agree with you that patience does show up in some cases, with age, but it's not just age, it's also with experience. Because if somebody is like, 89 years old and they haven't really done anything, I mean, like that age might not translate into patience. But to me, patience comes with accumulation of experiences.
Oh, that's a good one. That is true, because you can have the same experience every day for 89 years and not grow. And then you can have someone else who's had 30 years of like constant growth, and they could be farther ahead. Cause it's like a balance. You're mentioning patience, but then you're also mentioning discipline too. Cause it's one thing to know it. It's another thing to allow the actions to take place and allow the time to pass.
Yep. Absolutely. It's a fascinating topic. I mean, we can sit here and talk about it like for days, but but I'm sure you have some other ideas in your mind for the chat as well. But it is a fascinating topic, though.
The last piece on that is a few years ago, I think 5 years ago, I made a perception calculator
Mhm.
because I started to notice this. And so what I found out, like mathematically, is like, I don't know if I'm stating it right because I haven't said the words in a long time, but when you're 1 day old and you go from day one to day two, that is like 100% of your life, right? But then as it goes forward, it splits farther and
Mhm,
divides up more.
mhm.
And if you think about that formula about how long 1 day is for an 8-year-old versus perceptively how long 1 day is for someone who's 32, there's a big mathematical difference. And that was one of the things I was really interested in. And I built that calculator before I had kids.
Right. Yeah.
And now that I have kids, I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I can really relate to that. I have two little ones. My daughter is almost 3 years old, and my little guy, he's 6 months old. So I totally understand what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. My daughter she'll be 3 in September. And then my son is like one in a couple months.
Yeah.
So just a little bit older than your son. So it's just very, very similar there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And it just, it's, just before we move off of this topic, because obviously we all love talking about our kids. They are kind of the joy of our life. But even on an intellectual level, it is so interesting to watch world happen from their point of view. Exactly as you said, for them, it is like one day it could be a huge, massive change. And for you, it's just like another day. And I think that brings in that difference of perception that you're talking about. And it's really interesting because no matter where you are, if you understand this perceptive context of other people, when you're really in a situation and you have to make a decision, you could essentially be 18 different people in your head and really have 18 different perspectives before you make a call. And that is a quality. I actually think that since having kids, I have become a better decision maker. And it's just such a powerful thing, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, I've thought about that too. I called it like iterating through perspectives because I was reading this psychology author, and he had said that there were 16 like there were like 8 core mindsets and then like a 16 split like variations of those 8 cores. And it was just this psychologist I was reading. It was his concept of how mind works. And he said different people have these different perspective sets. And after reading that, I was like, wow, that's brilliant. But the way I happen to know that my mind works a little bit differently. And the thing that I observe my mind doing is iterating through different perspectives to figure out which one that I find is the one I want. And that one was not accounted for, which is actually why I named my company like 10 years ago. I named it Logic 17 because it was only logical that there would be like a 17th perspective, an abstract one. It was just like design agency, app agency that I had for about 10 years. But yeah, dude, you're awesome. Let's do some business stuff so we can understand your
Yeah.
products.
Yeah.
All
Let's
right.
do
So
it.
I have some confusion. I'll explain. You were describing earlier networks, democratization, empowering people all the way from mom and pop to enterprise. So I'm assuming that you have products that both the mom and pop can use and the enterprise. Can you talk to me about like what these products are and who uses them?
Yeah, no, absolutely, I can. So networking as a technology is an interesting area because a lot of people directly do not kind of relate to it, although they use it on a daily basis. So think about pretty much anything. Your cell phone runs on a network. Your Wi-Fi, your internet runs on a network. We are talking to each other on this video conferencing through a network, right? When you go into a store, and in some of the stores, these are like electronic shelf labels, and the labels change and stuff. Actually, a lot of them are our customers. But that happens on the network. When you get like, oh, you've been searching for this, like, would you like this offer and blah, 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 coupons or electric coupons, that happens on the network. Now that's on the consumer side. On the other side, um, pick up anything like, look, like, for example, NFL is a huge partner of ours. We are the official partners with NFL. When you go into that stadium and you're enjoying a football game and you love it, and you have your wireless, you can text it, you can Facebook it or Instagram it or whatever else people do these days, like all of that thing is possible by the power of the networks. You go to a hospital, people are, talking to their, and now more so than ever, people are talking to their doctors, through video conferencing. You instantly go and get your prescription. Hospitals are able to go and bring up complete units within days. I mean, like with COVID, you heard it in various different countries where it's just like, oh, they set up, an entire hospital in 5 days. Like, for example, it's not just the construction part, but making all of those machines, those fancy machines, like work with each other. That's network, right? I mean, I can give you 1,000 examples. Now, behind this all, which I call as experience, is a set of technologies. And some of them are kind of rather boring, right? There's like switches and there's routers and there's wireless APs and there's 5G and LTE and stuff like that. So that's the core technologies. Now, core technologies by itself, yes, we develop them. We have hardware, we have software, we have management, we have orchestration. But the real value that Extreme brings is to bring all of these components together in a, call it a package, which anybody can go adopt and deploy to get to whatever they are doing. We have large hospitals, which are our customers. They are able to do this telemedicine. They are able to, bring up a new doctor's office, in an instant and stuff. Our set of our technologies are behind that. Similarly, I talked about NFL. There's a lot of other stadiums. They do the same thing. Now you go to education where, like simple examples, schools can actually set, some security around perimeter, security, that who's in there, who's not. They can do automatic attendance, without really doing yes, ma'am, present kind of a thing these days. Recently, we had this school system, very large school system. They actually came to us and they said, like, look, this vaping thing is getting a bit of a issue. Is there a way where we can detect that? And we're like, yes, we can. So our set of our technologies kind of help them do that. Esports, right? We are big supporters of esports. So there are so many in manufacturing. I mean, the whole industry 4.0 is based on the networking technology, all these sensors kind of coming together. So if you look at it, so to us, there are products, there are services, because of course, when you're deploying them, a lot of different our customers, technology is not their business. They're just using technology to advance their business goals. So they need help in that. So that's where services comes in. Products are the elements of that. And then cloud, which essentially brings all of this together. So in a way to think about it, it is that we have cloud technologies, we have products, elements, and we have services. You wrap them together, and this turns into a package that a mom and pop shop to the largest enterprises and service providers in the world, they can just then go and deploy that. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense, that what is it that we do. We really are the facilitators of what your business goal is to what your capabilities are. We bridge the gap between the two with products, with technologies, with services, with packages. That's who we are. And we work with everybody on that spectrum, from people who have no technical skill, companies who have no technical skills, to companies that are super advanced, and everybody in the middle.
That's amazing. So you guys do like everything network.
We do everything network. We are one of the very few companies, I would even venture to say that at this point in time, we are the only networking technology provider that goes end to end in a cohesive fashion. Now, what do I mean by cohesive fashion, right? Coming full circle back to the M&A part, right? So a lot of companies, as they grow, what they do is they say, like, look, I've acquired this technology at this company. They create a different business units. And what happens, arguably, whether people accept it or not, in business units, business units develop their strategies, and then GMs kind of fight with GMs. And, there's a little bit of an internal competition, some more, some less. But in our company, that goes back to the culture. We believe in all Extreme as one team. We have no business units. We have this entire end-to-end technology portfolio that goes all the way from your branches, your wireless, to your IoT, to your 5G, all the way into some of the largest service providers and data centers in the world. And that all belongs into one team. So that's my team, right? So when we develop them, we think of them as a single thread. So when you work with Extreme, whether you're buying like the tiniest smallest thing from us or, the largest of our products for as a telco, you get the same exact experience. And that is unique to us. There is no other networking technology vendor that can claim that. And that's really, truly why, we are not just transforming ourselves, but we're really transforming this for our customers and our partners and our users as well. Because as you and I agreed earlier, consistency is important. When you apply that principle to networking technology, then the consistency of experience from one end to another end, that is the key, and Extreme excels at that.
I like how you talked about the teams and the GMs, because that's true, right? At companies that have that culture, and what I noticed is that some of the competition, or some people will compete against others, and then some people compete against themselves.
Yep.
And I found that I'm way more interested in competing against myself, because it allows me to sort of isolate, and I can control that. I can control the speed at which I move. I can't control the speed at which I'm getting information about how others have moved, right? So I like that concept of competing against yourself. Have you ever heard of the company, I think Sienna? They build the underwater cables. So I got to talk with Steve over there, and one of the conversation topics that came up, a big driver, he has 25 patents, awesome nerd guy. We were talking about optical to digital conversion and how stuff gets, transferred across continents and all of that great stuff. But one of the things that he said that you also mentioned is that a huge driver of this, increased need for decreased latency and is the esports world. He said that he's hearing a lot from there. You've said that in the conversation too. Tell me more about this growth, or what your thoughts are on the esports world.
I think esports are going to rule the world. They are just it's different generations have different kind of ways to engage with sports. The newer generation, for them, esports is bigger than perhaps the football and the baseball and the soccer and the crickets of the world, right? So they really engage towards that. Now, if you look at it, so there's a whole ecosystem that is building around that. Now, the thing about esport is that it is not confined to a physical space like any of the other sports, be it a football stadium or a park or, a pitch or whatever the case might be. Esports could be across the continents or around the globe, people interacting with us. And because it's sports, so it's in real time. So now what that does is that puts a very different level of expectation on the networking technology, because I don't know if you're a video game person. I'm not really that much. I see my nephews and stuff play that. But the thing is that they are sitting there talking to somebody on the other side of the planet, and they're playing in real time and talking and stuff. Look, that is an experience, right? And this experience, as we move forward in time and the newer generations, their expectation of the experience is entirely different than perhaps it was for me. For me, sure, I send somebody an email and then they respond in 3 hours. I was like, whoa, that was really fast. I'm talking about, when in early 90s, when internet really truly started happening. Here today, they're instantly talking to 450 people, right? And it's just instant feedback. So that expectation of the user is morphing so rapidly, and esports is just kind of a perfect example of that. The people who are engaging into that, and more importantly, the people who are spectators, because I think there is no other sports in which the spectator is actually part of the sport in a certain way, right? They're not just the spectators. So that new experience puts such a huge amount of requirement on networks, and then you actually go and you build for it. Because sometimes you build technology that changes the experience, and sometimes the experience changes and you build the technology to actually accommodate that. And that's kind of that's what, a lot of people ask me that, look, what, you're now the CTO, what do you really think about that? Are you really about technology and stuff? And I was like, no, I'm not. I have people who work for me who are amazing in technology. No, my goal is very, very simple. How do you take your technology and change the experience for the users and the society as a whole, and flip it around how the changing experience or expectations of the society transforms the technology that you have. And I think esports is a perfect example of that. We are very big in that, the Sunni school systems, we do a lot of stuff with them on esports. We have sponsored some of them. A lot of it runs on our technology. I'm a big fan. I'm not even a video game player, but I'm a big fan of what esports is doing, not just to the experience of the kids who are playing that or adults who are playing that, but also to the networking industry, right? So it's just a fascinating topic.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the legitimate business reason, right? That will help get us to the point where we can all go inside the computers. Right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm always forecasting. I'm always saying, okay, I've just become fascinated recently with like my life expectancy and then where technology will be near then, because without hyperbole, I actually believe that we will be close or there by the time my life expectancy ends.
Yeah.
Like I think we will be close enough or there. I mean, because like ideally probably have like 50, 60 years left. And I think that what can happen, see, the thing is, I mean, when I was in, middle school, like I can remember that. And I remember what technology in the world was like. And it was just so different.
Yeah.
So different.
Yeah. And I mean, like, so you said you're 32, I'm 43. So we have around like 10, 11 years between us. But my experience with technology growing up was probably fundamentally different than yours, although there's like 10, 11 years in the middle. And now as you move forward, even, like in 5 years, technology pretty much transforms itself. Coming back to your point of like, when does technology and humanity kind of combine into one, the singularity point? It's an interesting topic. I actually believe that it'll happen. But the way I have a slightly different opinion on this, I don't think it would be technology that would drive it. I think it would be the need that will drive it. I'm a big fan of expressed needs, latent needs, and then incipient needs. And what happens is that sooner or later, this need, somebody is going to pick it up and will believe that a business can be made out of it, and then it'll happen. It's just really fascinating how business and technology kind of like is a one-to-one punch, and when they come together, things just happen. So
Can
I
you
do
repeat
believe
that
that it'll
again?
happen.
You said express needs, latent need. What were the three needs?
Yeah, so express need, latent need, and then incipient needs. So express need, I want this cup of coffee, I'm expressing it. You are a coffee shop and you're giving me that. So that's an express need. The user has it, and somebody provides it. Latent needs is something like that the customer doesn't really know that they need it yet, but you come up with the idea. For example, esports. Who knew like 6 years ago that people are going to want to compete against each other playing video games across the continent? Right? But somebody came up with the idea. So that was a latent need that was there, but not really understood. And then incipient need is like something that is simply not possible. Like, for example, you just expressed a desire or a need, either way, whatever you want to call it, but that, look, the way I translate it as a business person is that, look, there's a person out there who believes that why do we have to end this experiment or this human experiment? Why can't it just change form from this physical world to perhaps a digital world? That's, to me, is an incipient need. And at some point, somebody is going to go after that, and then technology will catch up. That's how I believe that it's a cyclic nature of the experiential need and the technology available. They both spur each other on. And it's
And
only
you were
when
also
they come together, that's when magic happens, right? Go ahead, sorry.
yes, when they come together, that is when the magic happens. But I think you also alluded to it a minute ago, like, or my brain just did this. We record it, I can find out later. But like core human needs expressing themselves. So for example, like I believe we'll become interplanetary because we have such a core human desire for freedom and exploration.
Yeah.
I believe that we'll drive video games farther do the upload concept because we have strong desires for not only escapism on recreational aspects of it, but on non-recreational aspects of it, we have a strong desire for persistence. I mean, the need for human persistence has got to be the highest need. I mean, it gets dark when you start talking about situations where you would have to like choose between things, but like for that's like in our code, like deep down is the code to persist, keep going.
Absolutely, 100%. And I mean, like that exploration part. I'm like, look, this is how our forefathers discovered the rest of the world and all the continents. What makes us believe that we or our kids or their kids will not go exploring the rest of the planets or the entire galaxies? It is going to happen. It is bound to happen. It is in our nature. It's in our DNA. It is going to happen. It's just like, and then what happens is, because it is going to happen, because it is in our need, knowingly or unknowingly, we are developing technologies that will get us there. Now you can take the same thing and apply it to all different. I love the part about the persistence of human, I call it the human spirit or humanity, human experience, whatever you want to call it. Um, I think that is something that will absolutely happen because you know what? We are humans and we like to thrive, we like to explore, and we like to strive to get to what we want. And that is the biggest saving grace for this species. That's why we're so resilient. That is why we are who we are. And this will continue driving us. Yes, lots of dark clouds around if you look, but I believe in the human spirit to endure, to persist, and to progress. And technology is something that is an instrument that we have created to help us do that faster, better, more efficiently. So in the end, it's all about human experience. Technology helps.
You're giving me goosebumps, man. I love it.
Yeah.
This is awesome. I really appreciate you taking time today.
It was fun. It was great chatting with you. And you were absolutely right. It was just a conversation. We could have been having this on a cup of coffee, just randomly without even knowing each other. It's just awesome. Loved it.
And then, awesome. Thank you so much, Nabil. You have a wonderful day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.